keep up. Please don't crash. That's 5-0 on your ass. Don't get stuck. My shit blasting up. Window tinted, can't get caught. My bitch bad, sport more leave you on your ass. Taking up.
Yeah. What's the deal, everybody, man? This is Ricky Montoya checking in, a.k.a. The Foolest of all bears, and you are now tuned in to I Think You're My Driver podcast, man. So thank you to everybody who has been tuning in with me thus far, of course. If you are not already following me, the @itymd.podcast, of course, that is on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music Podcasts, and everywhere else that you can enjoy podcasts at, man. And of course, if you got a story to share, or you want to share what you got going on up here, you just want to share with good old Rick, man, listen, that email, itymd.podcast, that's at gmail.com, man. So thank you so much to everybody who has subscribed, followed, comment, liked, shared, reposted on your story. I really do appreciate that. The reason why I bring up the acknowledgments, man, is because here at episode 39, this one is, the title of today's episode is going to be called Gotta Have a Goal. So while I was, doing a little bit of research regarding this episode, I actually stumbled upon an article through Reddit that was like a random story that I didn't even expect to get a notification about. The story in particular was actually about this gentleman who had a pretty rough day. And the rough day in specific was described exactly as, by far, the worst day I've had in 7.5 years that I've been driving Uber. Now, he made $48.08. He was on the clock for about 6 hours, but only drove for about 2 hours. Now, he didn't post how many rides that he did. He didn't post if he had a bunch of long distance rides or just a bunch of short distance rides throughout a small period of time. He just posted the amounts. And to think that he specifically titled this as having one of the worst days within 7 years, it kind of woken something up in me, because I think it's okay to do what you do and to find your career working for yourself as far as being an independent contractor through Uber or Lyft. But I feel like at a certain point, you got to create a goal that's going to get you out of having to do this extracurricular activity for extra income. Because that's what we're doing it for at the end of the day, which is the reason why he was so angered in this post, bro. So it's one of those things where you really got to take into consideration as how much time you are putting into something versus how much you are getting back out of it. It's very important, because at the end of the day, you are taking care of you and yours. So if you're, sacrificing that extra time away from you and yours, it better be having some kind of benefits coming towards you. And let's be honest, man, at a time that we are now, things are starting to get way more expensive by the day. Seems like by the minute a lot of the times. So probably Uber and Lyft is going to have this little fall a little bit as far as with business. It's just what I'm kind of assuming, This article was actually about 2 weeks old, and I haven't driven in over like a year and a half. So I'm slightly disconnected from a lot of it, but I'm just remembering where I was, because I do remember those very low paying days whenever I'm putting in a lot of hours. It kind of reminded me of where we were during the pandemic. And I'm not talking about the official pandemic. I'm actually talking about whenever they were announcing it and giving us a release date. Like, it was one of those to where we're going into 2020. And, this is for, of course, my conspiracy minds out there that are listening. The one thing that I've noticed is that every 4 years around that election time, we get a random sickness that likes to drop on us, man. And it's like one of those reoccurring albums almost, if you want to take it, man. We're probably at part 12 at this point here with Corona. So this is fast forwarding back to 2020. And at this time, at the turn of 2020, I had actually just gotten this new job. And I literally am not joking when I say this. I started the week of New Year's of 2020. So I'm going through training. While part of the training that I was doing, I actually was what they call a lot porter. And I was shuttling people in our shuttle van, Honda Odyssey to be specific. At this time, since everything was so COVID focused, majority of the conversations, even if it was myself with the passenger or the passenger's coming together in the same shuttle van was all centered around COVID. And it was so funny, like hearing everybody's like opinion based off of all the articles that they read or all these news web pages that they watch or whatever the case is. Everybody was literally detailing all the precautions that you need to take as to what we were actually doing in that exact moment, bro. Like literally, it's all about, don't be in close proximity with a bunch of people, limit your outside time as much as possible, try to stay covered. If you're going to be around people, be within 6 feet, don't be in close proximity. And everything is like, oh, it's all airborne. We can pass it off to each other. It's one in such and such amount of people. I'm sitting there like, bro, it's 4 of us in this van. And the only thing that's really dividing us is carpet. Like, we could still reach and grab each other. I can guarantee you, if one of us had COVID, by the end of this ride, all of us have COVID, is what I'm thinking to myself. But of course, everything to us when we're not relating to it is going to be a joke. So, what wasn't funny about that joke is that my pay during Lyft and Uber was going low, like ridiculously low. Like, this guy's complaining about $48 in 6 hours, man. Try making $19 and only being out for 3 hours while doing 2 rides. Yeah, like put that into perspective, man. I mean, of course, I don't know where this guy is in his life because he did a very anonymous post. It doesn't have a whole lot other things that are tagged to it, no story or anything. And as a matter of fact, a week after posting that, he deleted the screenshot. So it's like, obviously he has some kind of integrity and he feels some type of respect for the company that he represents. But also at the same time, like, listen, every dog is going to have their day. And it comes to a point to where you have to refocus yourself and realign yourself to remember, what is the goal that I'm trying to reach when I'm working through this second source of income? Because at least how I thought about it is, oh yeah, I'm going to pull in some extra money as like a just in case. That extra income that you're just bringing in just for a rainy day or whatever, that rainy day can start to turn into a lot of storms, almost hurricane like, if you will. So you just got to be careful whenever you are really putting yourself in a second income environment, because we all have good intentions. A lot of us just have too many bills that we're trying to keep up with, but you also don't realize the trap that you are putting yourself in because you are bringing in more income. On the surface level, it looks a certain way. But that's where all the goals and the bullet points come into play. When you're really trying to get to your, when you're trying to create your own lane, you have to be able to set your goals on the forefront. So that way the goals are almost like hurdles that all you have to do is hop over and then you can finally get your baton to cross that finish line, man. Because you never know what life is going to throw at you in those hurdles. Some of those hurdles can be 3 feet. Some of them can be 4 feet. You have to obtain the skill to know what to do to properly and safely hop over those hurdles without stopping in the middle of your marathon, man. That's one thing that I've definitely learned in this life, man. And I think it's very important to also kind of treat Uber and Lyft the same manner, because you really never know what people are going through. And the vice versa is the same thing with the drivers. You don't know what we're going through at the end of the day either. Because at the tail end of the pandemic, like coming off of whenever the world was starting to open up a little bit more and everybody started to realize, oh, I guess we can be around each other. It's perfectly fine. And the first thing that everybody had on their mind is like, you know what, let me go ahead and start taking an Uber and Lyft. I don't want to get my Meemaw and I don't want to get my auntie sick by getting COVID. So let me go ahead and make sure I get the proper preventative measurements and don't get in the car with them. I'll just take an Uber to get to their house instead. Like, it was just like such a weird perspective. But at the end of the day, I was not complaining because I was making that dough. Just put it to you like that, man. And what was like also kind of like ironic, but well, what was very badly timed at this time, but also was like a perfect alignment, if you will say. I had to take out a debt around this time in like the beginning of 2021. And of course, when you have a debt, you got to pay it back. The benefit of this time of the pandemic, when it's going into the top of 2021, Uber at this time was offering a lot of incentives for you to really put your best foot forward to make sure that you are bringing in the business for them, but also giving you an incentive to get more income. When I'm saying this in particular, there's a lot of bonuses between Uber and Lyft. Now, I'm not going to say that one has better than the other bonuses. They could typically be about the similar ones, But the ones that I remember very, very specifically were when I was driving for Lyft. Lyft had these ride bonuses where, let's say you do 3 rides in an hour, you'll get an extra $15 to $30 for every 3 rides that you do within an hour. Now, that's money on top of the money that you're already making based off of the ride plus tips. Another thing that is also something to take into consideration is that depending on the area that you are, there's also something that they call an area bonus. So if I'm waiting on a certain side of town and I stay in that little bonus area, within that certain time, I can get extra little buffers just for waiting in that area to get a ride that goes towards the payment of the ride. So all this stuff was really adding up and really helping me out because I'm like, bro, what? Like, I'm gonna be doing this forever. Like, I didn't see myself not driving Uber and Lyft at this time because of so much money that I was able to bring in on the face value, of course, right? There's more details under that, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Now, with those rides, I'm bringing in, the extra little buffer per hour, but there was also even the ride streak challenges that they used to call them, or I think they were called ride challenges, where it's like, oh, do 100 rides this week, do 75 rides in 3 days, and get X amount. Some of them started to get whack over the years, but at the height of this, where I'm speaking about, this was the time where they were really offering the most because they were trying to get people out of the house and make these companies more money. I mean, of course, you're paying yourself back at the end of the day, but at the end of that day that you're not even thinking about because you're just going home to eat your bowl of mashed potatoes, the guys on the upper ups, man, the ones that are eating the steak with the potatoes, and it's not talking about box mashed potatoes, they're worried about the amount that the person is paying for you to come to them. So, I went off on a tangent there, but it is what it is, man. It's just like one of those things to where you really get lost in the amount at that moment. Speaking for myself, get lost in the amount that you are seeing come into that account right then and there. That it's like, dang, I just did this ride that didn't even go that far, but because I was in a waiting area bonus while having this extra streak for taking rides and also taking the amount of rides in a certain area, one ride I could easily make anywhere between $7 to $25, and I'm not even going that far. So in my mind, I'm like, bro, what? You know how many boxes of Cheez-Its that I could buy with that? like, like I could finally get me that full 12 pack of Alani's that I've been sitting there walking by every single Sunday at Sam's and Costco, man. Like, I'm really like thinking about all this stuff that I can put into my pockets, but also neglecting the fact that I am driving my daily vehicle. So not only am I like putting myself in this, short-term risk, I don't realize the long-term risk that you're putting onto your car. Of course, it's something where you're like, duh, Ricky, like you're driving your car. But listen, I'm just bringing in the money, trying to pay off my debt and pay myself at the end of the day. So that way I got some food in my stomach, man. At the end of the day, man, what I've learned as a man is what makes me happy is as long as I eat good food, as long as I eat my 3 meals a day, get my sleep and have my, time with all of my loved ones being here at the house. But the one top priority, if all of that stuff cannot be met in the very moment that I am thinking about, if I can be fed and get me some food and pay for it if need to be, listen, I'm happy as can be, bro. I am happy. Let's just put it to you like that, man. But it was like one of those like very interesting times to where I had a goal in mind that was, of course, was to pay back what I took out, but I was still able to meet that goal in the perfect time frame that needed it to be. Because around this same exact time frame, to be specific, there actually was like way less drivers out here in Oklahoma City. So we're talking about 2021 between January to like maybe July. There wasn't a lot of drivers out. So I was probably anywhere between 7 to like 12 drivers, like on average, maybe 1 to 6 drivers in the entire city. For those of you who don't know, Oklahoma City actually has the largest land mass as far as a city throughout the entire United States, if I'm not mistaken. So, a little fun fact with Rick, man. Just go ahead and take that in consideration to think little old me and my white tiny little sedan with no radio and a dragon plastic piece was actually cashing in a good amount and bringing in real good conversation and making people feel comfortable, but it was because I had a goal. So, moving on from that, the one thing that I do remember when I was going through the notes of this episode was around the same time within 2021. It might have even been 2022. I actually got a chance to take one of my favorite long distance rides. It was the funniest thing ever, man. I remember when it popped up. The ride pops up and it says, "Oh, you're going to pick up over here in Oklahoma City and drive 3 hours to Rowlett, Texas." So I was like, yeah, I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that. Why not, man? And what I was thinking about is because I didn't hesitate to click accept because the most recent time before that, I had got offered a long distance ride that the person actually canceled on me. So I was like, you know what? Maybe it wasn't meant to be. And I was thinking like, they're probably going to cancel on me. So let me go ahead and just accept it and just start driving. They cancel on me. I'm just going to move on about my business, bro. And luckily for me, the guy didn't cancel on me. To give you guys another rundown if you haven't heard the episode before, because I did tell the story once, but you're going to hear it again. I don't care. So I went to go pick up from what is that? I went to go pick up from the extended stay that's over there off of Meridian and Reno, I think it's the streets. And for those of you guys who know that little, Meridian strip, you got some nice nefarious activities that's going on and what I like to call the door-to-door sales ladies. So the guy comes out, I'm sitting out front, and he looks just panicked. He's wide-eyed and he's running to the car like holding his backpack like an infant, bro. And he gets in the car, he's like, "Are you Ricardo?" I was like, "Yes, that's me, sir. Are you such and such?" And he was like, "Yes, yes." And I was like, "Hey, so are we going to Texas?" He was like, "Yeah, unfortunately, we definitely are going to Texas, man." And he was like, "Is that going to be a problem?" And I'm like, "No, it's not a problem. I'm just like surprised that we're actually going out there." I'm like, "If that's the case, I definitely got to stop to get some gas." He was like, "Oh, please take your time. I'm really in no rush, man." He was like, "It's just been an unfortunate amount of time, but thank you for picking me up from that drug infested place." I was looking back at the hotel as we're leaving the parking lot while he's telling me this. And I'm like thinking like, "Oh, you must not be from here." And he was like, "No, no." And he was like, "That's why we're going out to Rowlett, Texas." He was like, "I'm actually originally from Dallas. I'm a travel nurse. And I took an assignment to get a job out here in Oklahoma City that's temporary." And he was like, "I literally get out here, and literally within the first couple hours of me getting here to Oklahoma City, I get into a car crash. The guy almost totaled out my Range Rover. So, the Range Rover gets on the wrecker, and I'm like, you know what? I'll just take an Uber, I'll get a hotel, and I'll just kind of just figure everything out because I didn't have to be at orientation for another day." So he's like, as I'm, calling the Uber to find a hotel just for me to somewhere to sit down and kind of ease my mind, once I got into the Uber, I realized that the car that had just got into a wreck that is on the wrecker has my wallet inside. And as he said this, I'm thinking to myself with a very hesitant mind because I'm like, what do you mean you don't have your wallet? And he goes to explain to me that basically he left his wallet in there and he also would keep an extra credit card for the days that he would lose his wallet. Ironically, that extra credit card for a just in case was also inside of the wrecked vehicle. So he's telling me all these things, and in that moment, I'm completely negating the fact that there is such thing as virtual pay and save payment methods. In my mind, I'm like sitting here thinking, like, of course I'm gonna have to come back here to the city, and I know you said you're starting a job here also as well in the city, but I'm like thinking like, if you lost your wallet and you also lost that credit card that you used as a backup, I'm not just doing this out of the kindness of my heart just because you got to get back to the same place I do, is what I'm thinking to myself. So, we're making the drive. We start talking, and he was an interesting guy, man. Like I said, he said he was a travel nurse, and he was one of those kind of travel nurses where he didn't mind going anywhere as long as the pay was good. He was like, "I literally take these assignments on like a 3-month basis." So he's like, "I go and help a facility for 90 days. He was like, "I was just in LA." He was like, "From there, I used to be in Nashville, Tennessee." He said, "I spent some time up in North Dakota. I even spent a little bit of time out in Florida. I want to go to Georgia or maybe even like another place within Tennessee." He was like, "I'm kind of just like bouncing around because I really haven't fully decided where I want to stay." And he was like, "That's the great opportunity that there is in travel nursing, is that you get an opportunity to live temporarily in a lot of these places. So it gives you an opportunity as, probably a young man such as yourself who's just trying to figure things out. And you can go and travel around and go see the world while getting paid to do it. And it's like he was explaining this to me while trying to sell me on it. Because another thing, for those of you guys who don't know, people who work in the medical field, depending on the company that they work for, they get bonuses if they're able to be a referral for somebody who gets a job. So I mean, of course he's going to be upselling it to me while we're going to be in the car for about 3.5 hours. I'm like, shoot, I probably, if I ended up spending another hour with him in the car, he probably would have walked me to the orientation. But it's completely understandable. He was like very interesting with the way that he was like selling this like medical stuff to me, and I started to realize that what it was as he was talking is because he also had a son himself. And he goes to tell me that his son was around the same age as I was at that time. So I think he said about 24, maybe 25. And he was like, my son, he doesn't really do shit. It's like, to keep it frank with you, he doesn't do anything. He was like, I worked very hard and I'm not originally from the States. I moved here and I really kept my head down so that way I could work hard and get a job in the medical field. He was like, doing what I do, I make a lot of money, but I'm not really around to be here. But he's like, it's upsetting me to think that all this hard work that I've done, and he said that he wanted to take a break, just work, not go to school, so that way he could be a gamer. And he was like, listen, son, if that's what you want to do, that's perfectly fine. You can live with me and have all this opportunity, but I want you to at least do something. He was like, my son is a very hardworking man. He doesn't spend his money unnecessarily. He saves his money. He works a very good job and he works a lot of hours. But when he gets home, he's just at home. He doesn't do anything. He was like, it's to the point to where I'm like, I need you to get a hobby or something. Like, he's like, take up candle making at this damn point. Cause like I come home from going out to Tennessee for 2 weeks, then transfer myself all the way over to California to come back to Texas to see that you're still sitting in your bed on a Saturday night. He's like, what the hell's the matter with you? And I'm like thinking to myself, like, man, I kind of like being at home too. Like, is that a bad thing? But it's also like one of the things to where, has he explained it, is that he felt like with the amount of work that he did, he kept himself busy so that way he can maintain to keep his motivation to be where he is. And he goes to basically explain that he felt like his son didn't have that drive that he had whenever he was trying to reach his goals. And that's just another thing that you really got to understand, is that you got to have a goal of your own. When you have a parent who is successful or goes into a successful field as far as work, you get an opportunity to kind of get a bird's eye view as to what you could potentially be doing. But at the same time, when your parent is the only one in that position and it's just you and that parent, whether it's your dad or your mom, and they don't see a certain little spark within you, they're going to really, really point it out, especially at an age of 24, 25, to where you're at home with your parents. Everybody has their own circumstances and everybody else has their own agreements. But nothing's worse than living under somebody else's roof and they come home after working a shift to see you sitting on the couch. You know, nobody likes to see a couch potato, no matter whose house it is, no matter who got off of work at what time. If I'm at my house and I come home to see my dog sitting on the couch like he just got out of a 13-hour shift, I'm kind of salty too. So listen, I understood bro 100%. But it was just like very interesting, like thinking of how I'm making this drive out to Texas with this random stranger. But fast forward to where we drive out to Texas. And the whole time in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, you told me you didn't have your wallet and you didn't have your credit card on hand. How are you going to pay me? And how are you planning on getting back here? Because just because I got to go back to the same place doesn't mean in the kindness of my heart, I'm just going to go ahead and start backpacking with you in my back seat. You know, also another thing is that when it comes to Uber and Lyft, you can add multiple stops to a ride, but you're not going to be able to add multiple stops between state lines. So when he got back into the car after going to his house to get what he needed, which I believe was his passport, so he can go and get some money out of the bank and be able to check into a hotel, what had happened is that I'm sitting there waiting for like a good 5 minutes sitting outside his house. He didn't close the back door, and I'm looking at a single little backpack right there. And I'm like thinking like, huh, okay. Because I had turned on the request meter to see what's the payment looking like if I stay out there. Because another thing that I could also do is make more money. I'm out in Dallas. It's a big city compared to Oklahoma. And at this time, there was a ride bonus that I was really trying to get. I think it was like 75 rides and I was at like 68. So I didn't really have that many to achieve before I could hit this bonus. And as I'm thinking this, he finally starts to walk back out to the car and I'm like, "Damn, I was hoping to go ahead and make extra money because I had two ride requests that actually popped up at that time. One of the ride requests I believe was like for like $14, $15 and the other one was for like 12, 13 or something like that. That's not very regular out in Oklahoma City. Like $13 is like a fantastic ride that you may get like once or twice an hour, maybe, not back to back. So I was like, "What? That's what I need to be doing. Like bump waiting on you for whatever you're trying to do." And he gets back in the car because one thing that I've learned about myself, I got a big heart, so I waited for him like a dummy. And we drive across town over to Irving to like this like factory warehouse where apparently we were meeting his brother who was letting him take his card so that way he had some cash to go and get this hotel. So go and pick up the cash from this warehouse and we start trucking back our way over to Oklahoma City. Mind you, after picking up this money over there from that warehouse out in Irving, I'm going on about hour 5 hanging out with this like random ass person. Like I spent more time in the car with that gentleman than I've ever spent with any stranger ever in my life. Well, maybe not. That's not the point. It was one of those things to where it was like such an eye-opening experience to think how comfortable I am to make people feel to be okay to take a 3-hour ride with me, but also to think that he was willing to like pay me all these extra tips, give me 3 extra rides and pay for these 3 separate rides for doing almost nothing, bro. And I did sacrifice a lot of time because I ended up getting home at like 11, 12 o'clock that later on that night. But it was like one of those things to where I was so happy because even though I didn't get a chance to achieve the bonus, I made like almost $400 that day. So I was like, you know what, man? I'm not going to complain because at the end of the day, I got to my goal that I was trying to reach. And that's the point that I'm trying to make is that even though you put yourself in a lot of these scenarios that may not seem ideal to get into, at the end of the day, you got to have a goal that you are trying to reach and you got to have a goal that you're trying to achieve. Because if there's one thing that I'm learning in life is that if you are doing something, it has to be for a reason. Because when you start to do things for no reason, things start to seem very impulsive. They can start to seem like it's coming from no structure or thought process. Because when you really ponder and what would you like to say? If you were able to put a strategy behind a plan to reach a goal, it's a lot better to, as I said earlier, find those hurdles that you're able to jump over and to continue on into your marathon to cross that finish line, man. It's very important for you to find your way to have those little checkpoints and bullet points. I actually had this conversation with a friend of mine once upon a time, where basically I learned that when you're having goals, a lot of us get more so focused on the goal as a whole as to what we're trying to reach. A lot of us don't really think about what it really takes to maintain the direction of staying on that route, passing all the checkpoints to get to your destination. Because if you put it into perspective as far as like driving, when you have a destination, there's multiple ways that you can get to there. There's multiple ways that you can take detours when you're trying to reach your destination. But at the end of the day, no matter what detour that you're taking, no matter what checkpoint that you are passing, as long as you get to that destination, you successfully reach that goal. Now, the reason why I say when you're taking detours, because even if you're veering off course, the one thing that you got to remember is you got to get back on the freeway, man. It's very important to make sure that you are sticking to that goal and have that mind that is really making sure that you are laser focused on reaching that goal, bro. You just never know what people are going through. You never know what's going to happen whenever you really stick to those goals. But it's just something to where you really got to put yourself in another perspective of making sure that along the lines with these goals, you are handling the checkpoints. And the reason why I emphasize that a second time is because around this same time, like I've said in previous episodes, my car ain't got no radio. The front end little plastic piece that covers right where your oil pan is, that is dragging. Not only is it dragging, that little plastic piece dragged from Oklahoma City to Rowlett, Texas, to Irving, Texas, and back to Oklahoma City with this random person. And I had to, of course, had the awkward conversation with him of, hey, yeah, that's my plastic piece. Like, that thing is dragging. He's like, oh, okay. Like, you going to get that fixed? I'm like thinking to myself, like, mind your business, You're paying me to get you to your destination, not pay me to give consulting advice, man. But it's also something to where you got to think of a lot of these things from a passenger point of view. So, of course, whenever you're thinking of everything from a passenger point of view, your customer service and your role of service is really going to come into play. Because the biggest thing whenever you have a goal is to make sure that with these goals, you have bullet points that are going to help you achieve this goal, and to know that you can always stay in line with reaching that goal, man. And I think that being an Uber driver is kind of one of the easiest ways to make sure that you can align with your goals. But at the end of the day, it comes down to how well you are able to maintain your own attitude in trying to reach these goals. Of course, when you're working for Uber and Lyft, everything is at your mercy. You're your own independent contractor, so it gives you a sense of learning how to be your own boss. When you're your own boss, there's a lot of lessons that you learn very easily. And a lot of people do not work well when they have to be their own leadership. They have to be their own motivator. They have to be their own HR, whatever the case, man. The thing that it comes down to at the end of the day is making sure that you are sticking to the goal. Because in my instance, at least for the context of this episode, whenever I was working towards my goal of paying my debt off, I was out there putting in my hours, whether it was 10 hours, 12 hours, 9 hours, or 6 hours. I was doing what needed to be done to achieve my goal. My thing that I like to do was like, hey, I'm going to be out here for, let's say, 5-6 hours. Within 5-6 hours, my expectation is I need to do anywhere between 14 to 18 rides. If I can't get 14 to 18 rides within the set time, so that means I got to keep going. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that you got to make sure that you are reaching your goal. You can have a goal and have a plan all in line, all that you want. But if you are not sticking to the plan to get to your goal, the goal is pointless. Put it to you like this, man. It's the same thing how you can think about it from this perspective, or you can think about it as faith without work is pointless. So working towards your goal means nothing if you didn't take the necessary precautions to make sure that you are staying in line with your goals. I think it's very important that when you're working towards your goal, that you are finding a way to get to your goals independently. Because when you are reaching towards your goal and working on it on your own, it's a lot more easier for you to have to take accountability and not put the blame on somebody else. Whenever you are in a scenario where you're trying to reach a goal with somebody together, you do have that accountability partner of somebody to make sure that when you're falling behind, they're, hey, let's pick it up. Let's get up and get up off your ass, all types of things like that. But what's also very important is that even whenever you are working with another person, it's even more important to make sure that you are staying inside of that goal to make sure that you can do what needs to be done, man. And the one thing that I've learned, especially when it comes to having like somebody such as an accountability partner, is that it is just as important for them to ensure that they keep you accountable. Because if they aren't keeping you accountable when you are already not keeping yourself accountable, that's a recipe for disaster for you to not reach that goal, man. Now, of course, ending off this episode, as I always do, if you haven't already followed me, that at itymd.podcast. It's on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music Podcasts, and everywhere else that you can enjoy podcasts at. If you got a story to share, email itymd.podcast@gmail.com. And for those of you guys who this is the first time tuning in, welcome to the club. I hope you enjoyed the ride along, man. This is your driver, the foolish of all bears, checking out. And I'll catch y'all next week, man. Peace.